He didn't seek power. He studied it. He watched the world like a surgeon watches flesh, with precision, not pity. Machiavelli dissected ambition, stripped morality from illusion, and found the structure beneath control. Tonight, his voice rises again, not from parchment, but from exile and silence, because the man who understood the mind learned to rule it. Machiavelli speaks.
Power begins in perception, but obedience begins in belief. Every empire, every kingdom, every family stands on one truth. People obey what they believe cannot be resisted. That belief can be love, fear, or illusion, but it must be cultivated. I learned this not from books, but from the trembling of courtiers who smiled at dawn and plotted at dusk. Men obey not because they must, but because they imagine the cost of disobedience. Control that imagination, and you will never need to raise your voice. When I served the Republic of Florence, I watched rulers crumble under their own kindness. They thought goodness would breed loyalty. But kindness, without strategy, is an open gate for parasites. They took mercy as permission, and the generous man became the most convenient target. The Medici knew better. They never asked to be loved. They sculpted an image that demanded obedience. They ruled by aura, not argument. A single word from their lips weighed more than a dozen decrees from the weak. Why? Because their presence was designed, every gesture rehearsed, every rumor planted, every silence intentional. They understood the invisible law. Power exists only where perception bends. I saw how easily affection turns into laughter, and laughter into rebellion. Love depends on mood. Fear depends on memory. The first fades, the second lasts. A ruler who depends on love is a candle in the wind. A ruler who understands fear becomes the wind itself. But hear me well. Not all fear is tyranny. There is a fear that paralyzes and a fear that disciplines. The first enslaves you, the second commands respect. If your presence makes others measure their words before speaking, you have already conquered their thoughts. The goal is not terror, it is awe. Let them feel that disobedience carries weight, even if you never lift a hand. In one council meeting, I watched a man accused of betrayal. He was innocent, but he defended himself too eagerly. He explained, he wept, he pleaded. And as he did, the room decided he was guilty, not of treason, but of weakness. When dawn came, his blood sealed his words. That day I learned, truth without authority is noise. Authority without truth is order. And I chose order. Never defend your strength. Never explain your silence. The man who speaks to prove his worth has already confessed that he doubts it. Let mystery be your armor. Let restraint be your weapon. Those who cannot read you will respect you. Those who can will fear to try again. Do not chase respect. Construct it. Not with charm, but with boundaries. Not with emotion, but with presence. And when they whisper your name, let them whisper carefully. Now write this, not with ink, but with intent. I do not ask for respect. I design it. Block 2. Fear as architecture. Fear is the oldest builder of empires. It raises walls faster than stone and binds men tighter than loyalty. You may decorate a throne with mercy, but you secure it with fear, measured, intelligent fear. Do not mistake me. I do not praise cruelty. I praise control. Because fear, when used without understanding, becomes chaos. But when you learn to shape it, it becomes architecture. I learned its design in the prisons of Florence, when I had nothing left but breath and awareness. The gods thought themselves masters, yet I watched their eyes before each blow. They struck not from authority, but from anxiety, afraid that I might remain calm, afraid that my silence might mean I understood more than they did. Even in chains, I studied them. And I realized something no philosopher ever dared to write. The one who knows his fear holds the leash of every other. From that day, I never tried to destroy my fear. I fed it, trained it, and taught it to bow. Because fear unacknowledged will poison you, but fear mastered becomes presence, an invisible crown that others sense without knowing why. There is a particular stillness in the man who understands fear. It is the calm before thunder, the quiet that bends conversations. People sense it. They stop interrupting. They adjust their tone. They cannot name it, but they obey it. I saw generals crumble because they tried to erase fear with false courage. They believed bravery meant silence of the pulse. But bravery is not the absence of trembling. It is the ability to make trembling work for you. The heart that beats faster sharpens the senses. The blood that burns under danger keeps you awake. Only the fool calls that weakness. The wise call it signal. When the Medici returned to power, the city kneeled, not from love, but from the memory of punishment. Even the streets seemed quieter, as if the stones remembered. That is true power, when your absence commands as loudly as your presence. The man who governs through fear must learn balance. Too little, and he loses control. Too much, and he destroys the bridge between obedience and revolt. You must measure fear like a craftsman measures gold dust, with precision, never excess. A single example of consequence is worth 1,000 threats. In diplomacy, I saw it often. A leader who smiles after punishment achieves what executions cannot. Obedience born from awe, not hatred. Hatred is a flame that burns both ways. Awe is stone. It lasts. You cannot remove fear from humanity. You can only decide who controls it. Either it owns you, or you own it. And the day you learn to look at it without trembling, you will realize it was never an enemy, only a servant waiting for orders. If you are to lead, in politics, in war, or in your own life, learn this. Fear is not the chain. It is the blueprint. Build with it, not beneath it. Use its weight to anchor your calm. Let your pulse remind you that you are alive, but never let it dictate your step. Because those who cannot master their fear build kingdoms made of glass, and the first tremor of fortune shatters them. So take this as your second oath. Do not whisper it. Engrave it, quietly, behind your ribs. I do not escape fear. I command it. Block 3. The illusion of virtue. Virtue is the most beautiful mask power ever wore. Every empire, every religion, every ruler draped it over ambition to make it look holy. But when the light fades and the candles die, what remains is not virtue, it is survival. Men speak of virtue when they are weak, because morality is the refuge of those who lack control. They call their helplessness goodness, their hesitation peace, their surrender compassion. But when they taste power, even briefly, the sermon changes. Virtue bends to advantage, and they call it wisdom. I saw this dance countless times in Florence. Priests who preached humility in daylight traded bribes in candlelight. Merchants who condemned greed by morning doubled their prices by night. Virtue is not constant. It is a currency that loses value as soon as it is convenient. Do not misunderstand me. I do not despise virtue. I despise the illusion that it can govern. A ruler who clings to pure goodness in a corrupt court is like a dove that insists the hawk will one day grow feathers of peace. The hawk does not change. The dove disappears. I once served under a man praised for his moral heart. He forgave his enemies, pardoned traitors, and smiled as they kissed his ring. Within a year, the same men poisoned his counsel, stole his fortune, and left his family begging under the same sun that once lit his palace. The city mourned him briefly, then forgot. Because history does not remember kindness, it remembers endurance. The Medici understood this instinctively. They gave to charity in public and plotted in private. Not out of hypocrisy, but precision. Their virtue was a mirror. It showed others what they needed to see while hiding the machinery that made the city breathe. That is governance. Not the illusion of purity, but the discipline to decide which illusion keeps order. Virtue without strength is decoration. Strength without virtue is decay. But the fusion of both, appearance of virtue, core of strength, that is art. It is the reason men followed tyrants who smiled like saints and saints who ruled like tyrants. Humanity does not crave justice. It craves story. And the story of a good ruler is easier to worship than the truth of a necessary one. Give them a symbol of righteousness to believe in, and rule with the hand they never see. That is not deceit. That is mercy in motion. Because chaos grows where illusion dies too soon. When I wrote The Prince, I did not write for monsters. I wrote for realists. I wrote for those who understood that morality without power is theater, and power without morality is ruin. The secret lies not in choosing one over the other, but in mastering the timing of both. Show mercy only when it strengthens your command. Show justice only when it restores order. Forgive only when punishment would make you smaller. You will be called cold. You will be called cruel. Let them call you names while you build stability from their noise. History never apologizes for the victories of the effective. It forgets the corpses of the kind. So understand this. Virtue is not light. It is a tool, a torch that burns when held too long. Use it to see, not to prove. Not to cleanse, to navigate. If you can do that, if you can touch morality without worshiping it, then you are ready to govern not only men, but their conscience. Now etch this in silence. I wear virtue as armor, not as chain. Block 4, the shape of power. Power is never still. It changes shape the moment you think you've understood it. One day it walks like a lion, roaring, direct, unstoppable. The next, it slithers like smoke, invisible, silent, already inside your lungs. Those who fail to adapt to its rhythm are crushed by the same force they once commanded. I watched generals fall because they only knew how to roar, and I watched schemers vanish because they only knew how to whisper. Power is not strength or cunning. It is the alchemy between both. Caesar Borgia understood this before anyone. When rebellion spread through his lands, he became fury incarnate. He crushed dissent like thunder, swift and absolute. But once order returned, he changed his face. He smiled. He rewarded. He spoke of peace while removing his enemies one by one. The same hand that punished now healed. The same eyes that terrified now inspired. That duality, that dance between mercy and menace, is what made him untouchable. He did not pretend to be consistent. He pretended to be inevitable. That is the secret. The weak cling to identity. The powerful cling to adaptability. Every animal of survival knows this. The wolf changes with the wind, the serpent with the season, the ruler with the room. The fool tries to be the same everywhere and calls it integrity. The wise become what the moment requires and call it art. When I worked as Secretary of the Republic, I met men who mistook predictability for honor. They acted with the same words, the same tone, the same moral compass, even when the battlefield had changed. They died admired, but forgotten. The world moves too quickly for statues. I learned that a ruler must be like water, clear when clarity commands trust, dark when the current demands disguise. Power does not reward purity, it rewards precision. Be thunder when fear is the only language the crowd understands. Be whisper when calculation achieves what armies cannot. Do not let the enemy learn your pattern. Uncertainty is the highest weapon of control. If they cannot predict your response, they cannot prepare for it. A story comes to mind. In Florence, a captain faced an army twice his size. He lacked soldiers, weapons, and time. So he spread a rumor that reinforcements were arriving behind the hills. His enemy panicked, retreated, and never realized the hills were empty. No blood spilled, no swords drawn, only perception rearranged. That is power without movement. Remember, fear motivates once, doubt lasts forever. Let them fear your wrath, but make them doubt your limits. That doubt will follow them to sleep, shape their choices, and rule them in your absence. The greatest commanders I met were not warriors, but mirrors. They reflected whatever their enemies needed to see, savior, demon, fool, until the battle was already won. And when they revealed their true form, it was too late. Power is not a weapon. It is a performance. And the stage belongs to those who know when to change costume. So when they ask who you are, smile, but never answer. Let your silence suggest 1,000 versions, each more dangerous than the last. Because the moment they think they can define you, they can contain you. And once contained, you are no longer feared, only studied. Be the lion when the moment demands violence. Be the serpent when the crowd demands peace. Be both when destiny demands victory. This is the geometry of power, fluid, shifting, relentless. The wise do not chase it. They become it. Now seal this with purpose. Do not write. Do not whisper. Think it, and let the thought harden behind your eyes. I am not strength or cunning. I am what the moment requires. Block 5, the discipline of cruelty. Cruelty is a word invented by the weak to shame those who act when others hesitate. But what they call cruelty, I call discipline. The difference lies not in the act, but in the intention. A man who enjoys punishment is a monster. A man who understands it is a ruler. I never admired the tyrants who spilled blood for pleasure. They ruled briefly, loudly, and died surrounded by silence. But those who used cruelty with precision, once, visibly, decisively, built order that outlived their bones. I remember the Duke of Ferrara, a man of quiet temper. When rebellion spread among his captains, he called them to a banquet. Wine, laughter, music, and then a single execution. One blade, one scream, one lesson. The city slept peacefully that night. He understood what many refused to learn. The fear of consequence creates more peace than the illusion of forgiveness. Mercy without strength invites the same betrayal twice. And every time you hesitate to punish, you teach your enemies the limits of your resolve. I have seen governors drown in the noise of moral debates while their cities burned. They spoke of fairness, of compassion, of the people's love. But every minute they delayed a necessary strike, the disease of disobedience spread. They believed themselves humane. They were simply too slow. Cruelty, when used properly, saves more than it destroys, because it shortens pain. It clarifies the line between what is tolerated and what is not. It tells the world, here the order begins, and there it ends. But cruelty, like fire, must be contained. A single spark of excess burns the house it was meant to protect. That is why punishment must never come from anger. Anger blinds, cruelty calculates. The wise do not strike often, but when they do, they make repetition impossible. I once wrote that men should be either treated kindly or destroyed, because they can avenge slight injuries, but never fatal ones. That truth has not aged a day. Half measures create enemies with memory. Final measures create peace. Yet cruelty is not only the act of the sword. It can be silence. It can be removal. It can be the deliberate absence of help when help would only feed decay. Sometimes the most merciful thing a ruler can do is to let a fool fall. In my years of exile, I learned that the greatest cruelty is not punishment, but clarity. The moment you realize how many suffer from their own illusions. You wish to help them, but you know that compassion given too freely weakens both savior and saved. So you stand still, and they call you cruel for not drowning beside them. Let them speak. The wise do not justify discipline to the crowd. They apply it once, cleanly, and let the echo teach for them. Power that hesitates becomes theater. Power that strikes without anger becomes law. So when the time comes, when hesitation claws at your throat, remember, it is not cruelty that corrupts power, it is guilt. Act with precision. End what must end, and then sleep without apology. Now take this as your fifth oath, and do not whisper it. Let it settle in the marrow, where compassion once ruled. I do not punish to harm. I cut to heal. Block 6, the alchemy of loyalty. Loyalty, the most expensive illusion ever sold to rulers and fools alike. Men speak of it with pride, but live it with convenience. They swear fidelity at night and reconsider it by dawn. I have seen generals kneel before one flag at sunrise and raise another before noon. Not because they were wicked, but because need changed direction. When I served the Republic of Florence, I too believed in loyalty. I worked with faith, honesty, and a devotion I once mistook for virtue. But the moment fortune turned, my name was erased from every oath I had ever inspired. The same counsel that had praised my wisdom chained my hands and left me to rot. That was my education. Since then, I have never trusted words spoken in safety. I have only trusted patterns born of necessity. Because loyalty, stripped of its poetry, is a negotiation of interest. And the man who forgets this will die surrounded by beautiful speeches and empty chairs. Cesar Borgia understood it better than anyone I met. He never demanded loyalty. He engineered it. He gave his men small shares of power, enough to feel important, but never enough to stand alone. They depended on him like vines depend on the tree they climb. If he fell, they would wither. That is loyalty by architecture, not affection. Do not seek devotion. Seek dependence. Do not ask men to love you. Give them reasons to need you. A ruler who builds from gratitude will fall with the next disappointment. But a ruler who builds from necessity will stand until the world itself forgets how to rebel. I once watched a nobleman in Venice rise to influence by lending gold to half the city. They called him generous, until the day came when his debtors became his army. They did not fight for love. They fought to preserve the hand that kept them afloat. That is the invisible chain every wise man forges. Loyalty, like metal, must be tempered. Too soft, and it bends with heat. Too hard, and it shatters with pressure. A ruler must strike the perfect balance, reward and fear, trust and distance, presence and mystery. If you are too distant, you lose obedience. If you are too close, you lose respect. Between those two lines lies stability. Never confuse loyalty with friendship. Friendship is a luxury of equals. Power has no equals. You may share wine, laughter, even secrets. But the moment hierarchy shifts, so does the truth of every bond. The man who smiles today may one day sell your silence for a safer place at another table. And yet, loyalty does exist, rare, fragile, beautiful. But only between those who no longer need to lie to survive. It cannot be bought. It cannot be demanded. It appears only when two wills understand that betrayal would cost more than alliance. If you ever wish to test a man's loyalty, do not ask for sacrifice. Deny him a favor. See how quickly his admiration curdles into resentment. Loyalty thrives in hunger, not in satisfaction. In Florence, I saw soldiers who claimed to die for the Republic vanish the moment the treasury ran dry. But I also saw one, a quiet man, nameless to history, stand his ground after every ally fled. When I asked him why, he said, "I have lost everything except my word. If I lose that, I have nothing left to be." That day, I realized true loyalty does not protect the ruler. It defines the man. So remember this balance. Loyalty cannot be forced, but it can be engineered. It cannot be eternal, but it can be maintained. And it always begins with understanding human hunger, not for morality, but for meaning. Give men a purpose larger than themselves, and they will guard it as if it were their soul. If you can achieve that, if you can build allegiance from need and elevate it to belief, then you will command something greater than armies: permanence. Now swear this oath not to others, but to yourself. I do not demand loyalty. I design it. Block 7, the solitude of command. Power does not surround you. It empties the room. The higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes, until only silence can breathe beside you. This is what few understand about command. It is not a chorus. It is an echo. When you begin your ascent, they cheer. When you reach the summit, they whisper. And when you stand above them too long, they pray for your fall. That is not hatred. It is the law of human comfort. Men love light only until it blinds them. In Florence, I learned this truth the hard way. When I served the Republic, I was surrounded by allies, dinners, laughter, endless company. But when fortune turned, all that music died overnight. No messenger came. No friend defended me. Even the air in my own house felt foreign. Exile stripped me of illusion, but gifted me with clarity. I realized then that solitude is not punishment. It is purification. Only in isolation can a man hear his own thoughts without interference. Only in silence can he distinguish between his fear and his intuition. The crowd gives warmth, yes, but it also gives confusion. Each opinion clings to you like smoke until your vision blurs. A ruler who depends on constant approval builds his throne on sand. The one who endures isolation builds it on stone. There is a loneliness that destroys and another that transforms. The first cries for company, the second learns to rule it. If you can sit in silence long enough, it begins to speak back to you, showing you not who you are to others, but who you are without them. And that truth, though heavy, is freedom. I remember the nights after my disgrace, the city lights distant, the wind howling through my empty study. I had lost my office, my allies, my reputation. But in that darkness, I also lost my need to be understood. And once that need died, something stronger took its place. Calm. Unbreakable calm. People think solitude means absence. They are wrong. It means presence. Of yourself, unmasked. It is where strategy becomes instinct, and instinct becomes command. Where you stop asking, do they see me? And start asking, can they feel that I'm still here? Every ruler faces this crossroad. Stay with the crowd and remain adored but powerless. Or walk alone and be feared, remembered, misunderstood, but effective. History is not written by the comfortable. It is written by the solitary. So if you ever find yourself standing alone, if the noise fades and only your own breath remains, do not call it exile. Call it evolution. Because isolation refines what applause corrupts. The man who cannot endure solitude will never endure authority. For every command demands distance, and distance, once mastered, becomes vision. Let others chase affection. You chase clarity. Let them drown in the comfort of crowds. You build the silence that outlasts them. And when they call you cold, smile. For coldness is only warmth that has learned discipline. Now engrave this oath where no one can see it, in the quiet center of your mind, where the voices stop. I do not fear solitude. I forge within it. Block 8, the dominion within. I have seen kingdoms crumble not from invasion, but from the tremor inside their rulers. The hand that cannot steady itself will drop the crown long before an enemy ever reaches the gate. Men speak of conquering the world. They forget that the first territory to master is their own mind. Every weakness, pride, guilt, fear, affection, is an open gate through which fortune marches in. Until that gate is sealed, you command nothing. When I lost everything, my post, my honor, my name, I thought I had fallen beyond recovery. But in that abyss, I discovered the purest form of power, control over reaction. The world struck, and I did not flinch. That stillness became my fortress. Understand this. The universe does not obey those who shout. It bends for those who no longer beg. A ruler who governs himself does not need armies. His calm is the new law. His silence, the decree. When I stopped chasing justice, I became just. When I ceased demanding loyalty, I inspired it. When I released the need for love, I found peace. Everything that I had sought from others was waiting inside discipline. Power begins the moment you no longer negotiate with your emotions. When you can watch chaos unfold and still decide, not react, decide. That is mastery. You cannot control men until you can command your pulse. You cannot lead soldiers until you can silence your own panic. You cannot shape destiny until you can face pain without disguise. I learned this after exile, when the world called me broken. But a broken instrument can still be tuned. And I tuned myself, note by note, nerve by nerve, until nothing external could detune me again. That is dominion. Not the throne of marble, but the throne of mind. The one no enemy can storm, no crowd can shake, no loss can dethrone. Let others chase symbols of command, banners, gold, applause. They rule rooms. You will rule yourself. And the man who rules himself rules time. There will come a day when they test you, when the crowd mocks, the fortune turns, the ally flees. In that moment, you will feel the old tremor rise. Let it. Then breathe. And remember what I say now. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is the obedience of fear. Do not seek approval. Do not wait for permission. Do not soften truth so that lesser men may digest it. You owe them nothing but clarity. When your heart hesitates, remind it who commands. When your mind doubts, remind it who speaks. When the world demands that you kneel, stay still, and they will feel the weight of your refusal more than any blade. That is the final art, to become immovable without becoming stone, to burn without smoke, to lead without sound. Now seal this final vow. Do not speak it aloud. Whisper it only to yourself, for words cannot contain it. Only will can. I do not wait for power. I am power. Block 8. The Dominion Within. I have seen kingdoms crumble not from invasion, but from the tremor inside their rulers. The hand that cannot steady itself will drop the crown long before an enemy ever reaches the gate. Men speak of conquering the world. They forget that the first territory to master is their own mind. Every weakness, pride, guilt, fear, affection is an open gate through which fortune marches in. Until that gate is sealed, you command nothing. When I lost everything, my post, my honor, my name, I thought I had fallen beyond recovery. But in that abyss, I discovered the purest form of power, control over reaction. The world struck, and I did not flinch. That stillness became my fortress. Understand this. The universe does not obey those who shout. It bends for those who no longer beg. A ruler who governs himself does not need armies. His calm is the new law. His silence, the decree. When I stopped chasing justice, I became just. When I ceased demanding loyalty, I inspired it. When I released the need for love, I found peace. Everything that I had sought from others was waiting inside discipline. Power begins the moment you no longer negotiate with your emotions. When you can watch chaos unfold and still decide, not react, decide. That is mastery. You cannot control men until you can command your pulse. You cannot lead soldiers until you can silence your own panic. You cannot shape destiny until you can face pain without disguise. I learned this after exile, when the world called me broken. But a broken instrument can still be tuned. And I tuned myself, note by note, nerve by nerve, until nothing external could detune me again. That is dominion. Not the throne of marble, but the throne of mind. The one no enemy can storm, no crowd can shake, no loss can dethrone. Let others chase symbols of command, banners, gold, applause. They rule rooms. You will rule yourself. And the man who rules himself rules time. There will come a day when they test you, When the crowd mocks, the fortune turns, the ally flees. In that moment, you will feel the old tremor rise. Let it. Then breathe. And remember what I say now. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is the obedience of fear. Do not seek approval. Do not wait for permission. Do not soften truth so that lesser men may digest it. You owe them nothing but clarity. When your heart hesitates, remind it who commands. When your mind doubts, remind it who speaks. When the world demands that you kneel, stay still, and they will feel the weight of your refusal more than any blade. That is the final art, to become immovable without becoming stone, to burn without smoke, to lead without sound. Now seal this final vow. Do not speak it aloud. Whisper it only to yourself, for words cannot contain it. Only will can. I do not wait for power. I am power. Do not look for forgiveness. You are not here to be forgiven. The gods grant mercy to the innocent. Power absolves only those who act. I have watched men kneel among ruins, begging the sky for meaning, while others, fewer, colder, clearer, built empires from the dust left behind. History remembers the builders, not the mourners. You were not born to wait for justice. You were born to design balance, not to seek destiny, to forge it. The world will call you ruthless, manipulative, cruel. But that is only the vocabulary of those who depend on luck. They curse the architect because they cannot draw. Understand this. Virtue without strategy is decoration. Morality without strength is theater. Love without distance is surrender. I have been called demon, cynic, monster, because I dared to describe what every man practices in secret. They hide behind the mask of goodness. I tore it off. They named me evil for it. But I do not serve their comfort. I serve truth, the kind that survives judgment. Men do not change. They only exchange their masks. The wise craft them. The naive worship them. So abandon the need to be loved. Abandon the desire to be understood. Both are chains forged in gold, and the most dangerous prison is the one that feels warm. You will be alone. You will be feared. You will be misunderstood. Good. That means you are finally free. Let the masses pray for virtue. Let them drown in their innocence. You will rule the silence between their words, because silence belongs to those who no longer explain. I did not leave a book for comfort. I left a mirror. And if you dare to look long enough, you will see the reflection of every power you ever sought. It was never out there. It was always here, behind your eyes, waiting for permission. Now you know the truth. Power is not inherited. It is created by the one who refuses to kneel. So when the noise of the world returns, when they ask who you follow, do not answer with names. Answer with presence. And if you must make a vow, your last, unbreakable vow, let it sound like thunder inside your chest, not as a plea, but as a verdict. I am not searching for power. I am its design. Then walk away from the echoes, because those who rule do not repeat themselves.